Welcome, everybody, to the Talent Revolution, Tales from the Trenches. I'm Joe Shambaum, along with my co-host, Jill Caniglio-Kirk. And yes, Jill, I said it right. Today, we actually have a really special guest, Becky, and we're gonna introduce Becky here in a few minutes. But I want to kick off the show with another Joeism, and I got to coin that because I think we need to trademark that, Jill. But for this topic, I was thinking about a treasure map. And, your career feels like a treasure map, right? We're going down a path in a variety of different ways, finding different treasures, going to different companies, getting different experiences, finding some gold in different avenues and then winding around, maybe because I like National Treasure and some of the Sherlock Holmes side of things, guys. But run with me. What do you guys think of your career like a treasure map?
Well, Joe, as always, you always find a creative angle for the topic we're going to discuss. And when I think about your career, I think we're all seeking, right, where that leads us, right? And what's the next step? What's the next clue to kind of finding that pot of gold, finding that treasure as you described. So I would just say, yeah, interesting analogy. And, if you think about a map, you really think about sometimes there's different ways to look at a map, right? And you say, like, well, if it doesn't say north, south, east, or west, like maybe I need to turn it this way or flip it this way. Or maybe there's a special, kind of hidden map like you'd find in a box of cereal years ago. Yes, they used to do things like that years ago in a box of cereal, right?
I
Where maybe if you put a blue lens over it, it looks different, right? And it gives you a different clue. So I would just say, yeah, I think similarly in our careers, depending on how you look at things, how you frame things, I think we're all searching, right, and seeking that treasure, so to speak. But Becky, I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I think that's a really creative and interesting analogy. I know thinking back to my career, it felt like if you think about, like you said, looking for buried treasure, and sometimes the clues are very cryptic. And so I think sometimes I didn't understand, I didn't have a good key, a good legend to understand what everything meant on the map. And it was really having to take the time and learn and grow that I understood, what the symbols on the map really meant. It took me a while to figure that out. And I think even sometimes I would get to the treasure and I would dig and dig and dig and I'd just find another map.
Or it's fool's gold. Could be.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know if either of you can relate to that, feeling like, okay, you've hit this road, you've hit this point, but it's really leading you somewhere different.
Yeah, I definitely can. And the other thing I just thought about is like sometimes you need to involve other people in saying, hey, what do you see in this? Right. And maybe you need to stop and ask for directions. Dare I stop at the gas station? Right. If I'm using the GPS on my phone and I'm spinning in circles going through these roundabouts, dare I actually ask another human for guidance? But when you talked about having that legend, that really clicked for me from the perspective of, who maybe I may have leaned on to kind of share that, right? Kind of be vulnerable with and kind of ask for guidance and saying, hey, what do you see, right? Am I reading this the right way? Am I interpreting the clues the right way?
Just watch out for that pirate ship. That's all. So
already R.
Love it. All right, Jill, do you want to kick off the show then?
Absolutely. So, welcome everyone. I am really pleased to announce and introduce our guest, Becky Bortak. Becky and I go back a few years. We met actually through a networking group, and Becky has a really impressive career in talent management, and also recently became an accredited executive coach and has her own coaching practice. Becky, we're delighted to have you here today. And really excited about this topic because I think so much of our audience and so many people, no matter what type of roles they're in, what type of careers they're in, or really where they're at in their life, can relate to this quest for the gold, right? Quest for treasure, right? What is it that brings me joy from a career perspective, right? How do I find that career that I really, find fulfilling? And I'd love to kind of have you share a little bit about your background with the audience and then jump into this topic with you.
Well, thank you so much, Joe and Jill, and thanks for the nice introduction. And I've always really appreciated getting to know you through that networking group, and now introducing me to Joe and being a part of this podcast is really meaningful to me. I've been listening to your episodes and really enjoying them, so I'm happy to be a part of this conversation today. Yeah, and I feel like I have a really unique career journey because I don't know if you've heard of the career jungle gym idea that, it's not a career ladder, but a jungle gym. You're climbing here, climbing there. And I think that really describes my career well. I did not have a linear path. And so I think that's where I have the expertise and the experience to be able to relate to people who didn't, graduate from high school knowing exactly what they want to be and then just do that job and just keep doing that job for 20 plus years. I really had to search and use a lot of treasure maps and a lot of different people to get to where I am today. So I'm excited to share my story, and hopefully it'll be helpful to your listeners. My journey can give them some, point them in the right direction for their futures.
Yeah, I definitely think that it's the few and far between that really have that clarity at a young age, right? Of knowing their passion, right? Understanding where they fit in the world. And I think so many people feel the pressure to have it all figured out then.
Yeah.
And I know that the minority are the people that really kind of make that decision early and end up loving and sticking with what they're doing. So I'm sure a lot of our audience can relate to you. So I'd love to kind of dig into this with you and maybe walk through a little bit of the process you went through, and maybe what tips you can help with our audience take away from this topic today and this conversation on really in reflection. I know you didn't have this plan walking into how you ended up in your career journey, right? But your reflection, your experience as a leader, your experience as an executive coach, how you would frame how you got there, right? And what advice you would give to other people.
Yeah, no, happy to do that. And I was definitely that 18-year-old that had absolutely no idea what I really, all I knew was I was going to college, right? And I think a lot of people, and some people don't even know that, but I did know that. I knew I was going to college, and I knew that I loved English and I loved music. And so, of course, that's what I was going to study in college. But I had no, thought process to, well, what would that mean in the real world? So I had a lot of fun in studying Shakespeare and singing in choirs, and then I graduated, and I thought, oh gosh, now what do I do? How do I turn this into a job that I can make into a living? And so I went back and relied on a skill that I learned in a sophomore year of high school, which was typing, and I became what's now administrative assistant, but back in the day was a secretary or a receptionist. And I spent a good 5 years answering phones, taking notes, getting coffee, doing all these tasks as an administrative assistant that were not challenging. Obviously, we're not using my skills.
I'm sure that was really a challenging time to kind of say, geez, I went to college, I did all the right things, I got good grades, what now, right? And this is where I find myself. I'm sure that was really challenging.
Yeah, it wasn't what I expected. And I think, Friends is still a popular show today. And I remember that was, on at the time, that was new at the time. And just the idea of these 20-somethings who were just they were always stuck in second gear. And that's how I felt, right? I'm just stuck in second gear. I don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing. And this is not the job or the career at all that I want, but I don't know how to get it. I'm just feeling very lost. And so I just kind of spun my wheels and meandered through life that way for a while. I just kept thinking, if I just change jobs, it'll be okay. But it was the same work, right? It was the same work that I was doing. So fortunately, one of the companies that I was working for, they decided to use the DISC assessment. And if people aren't familiar with that, so that's a kind of a behavioral assessment, just like, other types where it gives you information about who you are and what I didn't realize was that was going to be that was going to be a point on my map, right? To show me that who I was. And who I was a person who loved people and who cared about people. And I knew that about myself. I knew I had high empathy, but I just thought everybody did. This is what everyone does. And this is, when you do it yourself,
Yeah, you didn't visualize it being like a key to a career track for you. You just thought, well, that's who I am as a human being, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't, what can I do with that? I'm just a nice person. But having that really opened my eyes to, oh, this is something that I could actually use as a skill, and I could start to help people. And so that led me to decide to go back to school and get my master's in counseling. And I went to Oakland University, and I took a job still as a secretary, but this time it was for a different organization. So doing work for them and studying, this counseling degree.
Well, and it sounds like that was a real aha moment for you for whatever reason. Looking at your assessment, kind of taking all that in, probably had you not spent some time realizing you weren't in your happy place, right? Maybe having done that at a different point in your life, you wouldn't have made the same move. It sounds like it really was a pivotal moment to kind of say, I need to make a decision and take a big step, right? How do I get out of second gear here? And it certainly sounds like that was kind of the catalyst to your making that decision and pursuing your master's degree. And, kudos to you, because as someone who already earned a degree that they couldn't use, I'm sure you think about the financial investment, right? And to talk about going all in, right? So now I'm going to take on this additional step in my learning journey, right? And I'm sure there was some apprehension of like, does it really take me to where I want to go? And how do I earn a living at it, right?
Well, it sounds like she could sing or, read poetry. So, it's always on the back end. But I got to say, the assessments are fantastic, right? And we can do a whole segment on assessments, and definitely pro assessment side of things. But that's great to hear that, you took it personally and then made a total shift and shifted that. And how was it? And I guess that's my question to make that out of the administrative assistant secretary world to a counseling, whatever that next role, how did you get that chance?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I talk about it like, oh, it was just simple. I just, made the decision. I want to be a counselor, right? After I received that assessment, it probably took me a good year or so to really start to contemplate, what do I want to do? And there was the consideration, this is a lot of money. I'm investing in something different. And I think a couple of things really made me decide to move forward. One was I was miserable. I was really miserable as a secretary. I think a lot of us move or make change as a result of pain, right? We just don't want to be doing this anymore. Secondly, I'd seen other people in my life who had made those choices to go back to school, and it was working well for them. And so I think just seeing that those examples in my life made me feel like, okay, this is something that I could do. It was still really scary to step out and make that decision. And when I enrolled, I was very nervous and kind of second guessing myself along the way, right? It's really going to be right.
Am I having an early midlife crisis? What's happening, right?
Right. Exactly. But I knew something had to change, and so it was worth the risk at that point to make the change.
But on the employer side, like, how were you able to break into that new opportunity and shifting it, right? I think there's a lot of listeners that be like, I want to change. I mean, especially in the recruiting world, they're like, I want to do something else. I'm burnt out. I'm done.
Right.
Or the market's not there anymore, right? Let's be honest. Like, they love what they do.
Current situation, yeah.
Yeah, current situation. Market's not really there anymore. How do I leverage these skills and passions I have to kind of earn a living and do something that brings me satisfaction, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So with the Master's in Counseling program, it had a built-in internship, and so there was opportunities through that where, I mean, I was still working as an administrative assistant part-time to, pay the rent, etc. And then I was able to start adding on after the internship, started to do some counseling after that. So that was a blend of different things. And then I also ended up with a really fortunate opportunity where the company I was working for, they really liked what I was doing. They saw that at that point, I was an executive assistant to the president. And so I was keeping things very confidential. And so when they lost their HR person, they said to me, "Oh, you're good at that people stuff. Why don't you do HR?"
It's like you fall into a career. I've heard of that before. So
Yeah. So I think that was a combination of, what do they say, that luck favors the prepared, right? Where I was just sort of in the right place at the right time, but I was also demonstrating, integrity and showing my people skills through the work that I was already doing with the company. And so they trusted me to become their HR person. And what I found for me was that was really just the perfect fit. I enjoyed the counseling, but to listen to, just to have that emotional energy to do that for 40 hours a week was a little more than what was working for me. So to get into HR and be able to use those same skills and also be able to blend in other things within my day, that was really the perfect fit for who I was.
Yeah, it's interesting how sometimes you're in the right place. And like you said, having that lens into the company, demonstrating your, intelligence, your skill set, your awareness of other people and such. And it's almost kind of like by accident, right? Had you not maybe been given that opportunity, you wouldn't have realized that perhaps the generalist type role was a good fit for you early in your career versus going into counseling. Do you ever kind of reflect on, well, what if that didn't happen? What might I be doing today? I'm sure you've asked yourself those questions.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I would have leaned in more to the counseling for a while. I think eventually, though, I would have ended up in some type of more blended role in the corporate world where I was using, eventually finding myself in development and what for me, helping people improve and get better and just that
Yeah.
is a different way of looking at it. So when you think of counseling, you're thinking of people who are mentally unwell, right? That they're almost sick, right? So that's a different model than looking at people when you want to coach them or you want to develop them. That people who are doing well in life, but they want to improve and they want to get better. And so that's where I shine, is helping that more positive approach of helping people just get better in their lives, find that next level that will get them to the place they want to be.
Yeah, and when you said that, I really thought about the term, you see the potential in others and you want to help them realize it, right? And that you find fulfilling, which I could certainly identify with. So I can, as you were talking about that, I was like, I get that feeling. I share that passion. I'm a generalist and I don't know that I'd really be good at doing anything else. Don't quote me there, but I love the variety as well.
Yeah.
But that helping other people, helping them find their place in the world, seeing that potential and kind of helping shepherd them to kind of finding their happiness, I could certainly relate to. And I know you well enough to know that that's what brings you joy. So
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what, the second part of my journey was being an HR generalist and getting that exposure, which was great. I literally did everything from, recruit to training to employee relations to benefits to payroll. We know all that as a one person HR show, but it gave me great experience. And then I was able to, through many failed job interviews, but finally found the right one to get into a big corporation where I was able to really get mentored by a true HR professional who had been there for a while and be a part of a larger HR team. And so that's when I got my first taste of talent development and said, aha, this is really what I've been looking for.
Well, so what was that aha though? Was that because of the mentor or was that because of how did you get that next aha?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. That's a great question. So it was a couple of different things. Through the mentor, she was really great at wanting to do projects outside of just the day-to-day HR business partner. And so we did basically a disc workshop with the organization, rolled that out. And so that was really exciting for me to see how people learn from that, how they, change their perspective. It helped them identify their potential. And that just really kind of gave me that first taste of, oh, this is really cool. And then I also did the Strengths Finder while I was there. And that was another one where like my top one was basically empathy and then developer. And I said, developer, okay, this is what it resonates with me. And it just was like, I knew was finding out myself at this point that this is what I love, but just to see that in black and white, that I'm a developer, that was huge for me to just confirm that that's where I wanted to head.
Very
so then
cool.
was there goals? Like, how did you then achieve those things, right? Is that maybe one of the part of those assessments, the goals, the plan, the next, those next plots along the treasure map to be able to get to that rainbow? How did that play out?
Yeah. So this one was a more intentional design, right? So I knew who I was finally. I had that understanding of what was really going to make me happy and what was going to be like the pinnacle, like you said, the rainbow of my career. And so I also, when I thought about the talent development people, I kind of saw them like way up here, right? Like, oh, these people are really good at facilitating training, and they're so comfortable up in front of people, and they're smart, and they have all these skills and use all these words that I don't know what they are. And I wasn't sure that could be me, because it just felt like, well, I don't know any of that, and I'm kind of scared to talk in front of people, and that's never been who I am. So I started out first by just starting to meet with different talent development people in the organization and find out, how did they get their job? What did they do? And someone said to me specifically, it's just about getting to know the lingo and talking with people and doing what you're doing. And that was like another like light bulb moment, another point in the map that said, okay, I need to be involved in a project. I just need to start to get to know it. It's just something that I don't know, but I can know it. I just have to expose myself to it.
And I would just say, arguably, there's lingo in every specialty area of HR, but the L&D talent management people have more acronyms than anybody else, right? And it's like, when you're not a specialist when you're in that crowd, because I'm like, wait a minute, they're going so fast with all the acronyms, and I'm sure anybody who works in that field knows what I'm talking about.
Yes, 100%, 100%. We do love our acronyms. We got to always make sure they spell out the right thing, but yes, we do.
We're not going to give Joe a test on that, because this is a rated G show, and we're not going to go there.
So, perfect.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Becky, I'm interested to kind of understand at what point maybe you were thinking about coaching more as an avenue you wanted to pursue. I know there's a lot of other people in the HR world that are particularly interested in that. Maybe you can share a little bit about your journey there and where it's led you, and any advice you have for our listeners.
Yeah, that's a fairly recent journey for me, although it was something that I was thinking about at the same time as talent development, and something that I, again, started talking to other people there was a coach that we used at that company. And so I talked to her a lot about what she did in her job. And it was just always something kind of rolling around in my brain that I wanted to do, and felt like with my background would be something I could pursue. So the step really for me was to understand, what it would take to do that. So I did some research and looked into different programs and things like that. And then the key really came for me again when I was at the different organization. There was a woman there that I just really resonated with. She was doing some training, and I started talking to her and found out she had a coaching program that she ran that taught people how to become a coach. Mm-hmm. And what worked for me with that specifically was it was a short program. It wasn't a very expensive program, right? Some of these programs you could spend 2 to 3 years. I'm like, I have my master's. I don't want to, do that. This was a 6-month program that would give me all the practical skills that I needed to really be a good coach. And and then would give me that, accreditation to make me be official. And I know as an HR, I'm sure even in talent acquisition, Joe, right? You already have the coaching skills. Like you're coaching all the time.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
Customers and candidates and HR folks all the time.
Yeah, I think the difference, I think it is a natural ability of many people in our profession. However, there's also a tendency, I think, at least for myself, where I struggle to want to help people solve problems. And that's not what coaching is, right?
Yeah.
So I think having some training to really understand what is your role and how do you not overstep those boundaries and really help guide the process, for any person that works, whether they're looking at certification or not, is time well spent. So.
Yeah, and that was the biggest thing that this program taught you, right? Is exactly that. Like, so she uses this box that talks about, are you being supportive or are you holding people accountable? And there, of course, there's people who get the job done, just do it. Here's the advice, go do it. Tell them what to do all the time. And then there's the people who are like, oh, well, that's really tough. I'm so sorry, and we'll make it through. It's okay. And you can imagine the teams of people who are very tough, like they're getting a lot done, but no one's really happy, right? They're not feeling good. They're not, no psychological safety. And then you got the other team who they all feel great. They love each other. They're wonderful, but probably not a whole lot is getting done, right? They're just
they're still kind of confused, right?
Right.
But they feel better. They got a warm hug, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that blend, if I had my box here, that blend, the top right corner of being able to be supportive and still hold people accountable. So as a coach, one of the things that I do is I do provide a safe space to listen and to understand. That's the first step, is that assessment. But then I also am very clear about what are your goals? Where do you want to head? We can sit here and talk about it all day, but if, you came here because you want to change. So let's get down to that business, and not giving them advice, but just letting them be the ones to decide, this is what I do want to do, what I don't want to do. And then me being the one to say, okay, well then let's make a plan and get there. And I'm going to hold you accountable. And if we decide to change, if the map tells you something different, then we go that way. But in the meantime, we're going to keep moving. And now that I say that, Jill, I think it's the keeping moving part, that's so key. I haven't, I could look back and say, well, it took me so long, I've been at this 15, 20 years, right? To realize this, but at the same time, it did take me, that's how long my journey took, and that's okay. And it was because I kept moving, though, that I did eventually arrive here.
Right. And you kept moving closer to what brought you joy, right? And maybe at some point you thought, this is it, because this is wonderful. And then you kind of realized that, wow, I didn't realize it could get so much better as I expose myself to new things, right? So I think that's also a lesson for people, saying you really won't necessarily know when you've arrived. You may think you've arrived, but really always being open, always being, curious, I think, about what other, having conversations with other people, opening your mind to other possibilities is also really, I think, sound advice, because I think I saw a point in your story where you talked about being very happy and finding gratification. Had you stopped there, right, would you have really taken the full journey, right? And I think many people are afraid to take those steps or listen to those cues. And there's nothing wrong with taking a step and saying, boy, now I know this one isn't the right one, but at least I know that, right? And then I can kind of maybe move a little bit closer in this direction to another area. So anyway, I just had that thought, and, could see a lot of people kind of accepting that this is better than where I started, and I'm happy, right? And I'm satisfied. Yeah. And I think the more positive a person you are, the more you look at what's good in your life and you list all these things you should be grateful for. And maybe it holds some people back from kind of saying, I want more, I deserve more, So I could see that sometimes people have that moral conflict about are you never happy enough or whatever. But I think having that openness, right, having those conversations, exploring, is definitely a way that sometimes people arrive to a completely different place that, brings them a different level of joy. So.
Well, that's how you find out what you really want, right? All the different experiences and all the different questions you ask and the advice you get lead you down that path, right? And again, sometimes they go to a dead end and you go back, right? Or you you end up like a snake and ladder and go south to keep going.
Right.
But that's the whole journey, right? That's learning and understanding to know what good looks like, right? And we don't know what good looks like until we know what good is, and we know what bad is potentially.
Right.
So that's the evolution.
Yeah, and sometimes, your life goes through many phases with age, with different family cycles, different things where one thing kind of fit your life and it brought you joy. Now suddenly you're in a quest for something new, right? So I think that's a natural evolution, and everyone really kind of could use help in having a process to follow so that they can actually, hold themselves accountable, maybe find an accountability partner, right? And take that journey. So
Yeah.
I know, Becky, you've put together some formal materials that you have found helpful, and maybe you share with some of your clients. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe how some of our audience might benefit from that?
Yeah, for sure. And I was just thinking that, Jill, that, you know, it, your life circumstances can also determine, right, what your job and what's bringing you joy and what's most important to you. So I have a career roadmap guide that I like to share with my clients. I'm happy to share it with your listeners as well. So if they go to Becky Bortak, BORTAK.com, they can download it there. And what it really does is it starts out with this assessment piece, which is, one of the things it looks at is your values. What's most important to you? Sometimes in your life, it is most important. Salary is the most important thing for me right now in that career development. And that's okay. Sometimes I need to take a step back and it's more about, flexibility in my job, or it's more about, I want to have joy in what I'm doing. That's the most important thing. So it just depends on what your values are for that moment. So doing that assessment, understanding yourself through a assessment that's created like a disc or like a strengths finder, or just even talking to someone who knows you well and getting them to say, hey, what are my strengths? What do you see that I'm good at and doing? And then once you know yourself, that's when you can really define that plan, define the goal rather. What is it you want to get to? And for me specifically, like I said, knowing that with talent development, that was my goal. I knew that was really going to be that would bring me the most joy. But then once you have a goal, you got to figure out a plan. How do I get there?
Right.
Because if we can have a plan and think, oh, that'd be really great. Like for a long time, I'm like, yeah, I'd like to be a coach someday, but I didn't really have a plan. It was just this idea. So once I had the steps, I'm starting to talk to people. I'm starting to look at programs. I'm starting to understand what it would mean to be a coach. That's when it came together for me. And then inevitably, there's obstacles, right? There's always obstacles. That we have to overcome. I went through, I was an HR journalist there in 2008 when they had the layoffs. And so I had fortunately I kept my job, but I had to let a lot of good people go. And that was a really tough time. And so there's times of just like right now, right, where there's political upheaval or different global things that we can't control. And so sometimes there's obstacles we have to overcome. And it was important for me to have people who kept me true to what I was going, to let me know that this isn't forever, right? We all know that these cycles happen. And so finding what you can do in the moment to get through and then move forward to your goal and not letting go of it.
Yeah, and I think those setbacks are just normal, right? And you're going to have maybe days where you kind of question, am I on the right path? I would just say, look at your network, really think about who who someone may know, right, who can help you.
Yeah.
Because I think there's this innate desire for people to help other people, but I know it's really one of the hardest things to ask for. But I would just remind people that you're not in this alone, right? You have the power of your network. And we talked about things like having accountability partners and things like that. I think there's a lot of different aspects of how you can help guide yourself and put together a really robust plan that helps you get there. So yeah, I would just say we all feel like it's just on us and we have to figure it out. And I think it starts with having the vulnerability to like engage other people in this conversation. I know when I get into these conversations, I realize that everybody has the same needs and thoughts, right? And we always feel like we're the only ones, but that's really never the case. So I would just say there's probably someone out there listening saying that's me, right? And I hope if that is the case, that after hearing today's conversation, they're inspired and can use some of these resources that I think are wonderful that you've offered to our listeners. So thank you for that. And I guess at this point, Joe, do you have any closing remarks, comments, questions for Becky?
So there's one question first is you mentioned assessments multiple times. What do you think how often should people take those, right? I know certain things don't change, but depends on the assessment. But what's that frequency look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it depends on the assessment, and it depends on your stage of life. I would say if you're in a different stage of life, if you've changed jobs, if you're looking to do a job change and it's been a couple years since you've taken an assessment, then I would recommend going ahead. I think if you've I wouldn't do it any more than a couple years at a time, right? Because they, like you said, they don't change a lot. And it may change a little bit, but once you have that main information, you can probably feel pretty confident that that's telling you who you are.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
I'm having a little internal laugh because there was a time I was in job search that I was asked to do the same assessment so many times. I was convinced I was on that company's watch list. So it was a bit uncomfortable and awkward for me, but I ultimately got to the point where I'd say, well, I do have my results, or you can ask them for them, because it's awkward to take them over and over. And I feel like sometimes it kind of, you get this false read if you do that, right? So anyway, that was like a little personal internal chuckle I had to share, as we often share our tales from the trenches.
Yeah.
There was definitely a time I was going through a number of executive interviews that involved the same assessment tool. I won't say which one because they're not endorsing us, but if they want to, we are interested and we will absolutely take your phone call. So anyway, sorry about that. I got a little bit of a silly look on my face, and that's why.
Love it. So the one tale or the story, in a sense, it's, and I wanted to say this from the start, but I always ask people, what do they want to do when they grow up? And these are folks that have been doing it for 20, 30 plus years, and they always laugh and chuckle. But and they're like, you know what? It's the toughest question. And I think I've said this in another episode before, but that's that changes, right? What do you want to do when you grow up? And I don't know, but what makes you happy? So it's all the questions. And that's the other summary, in a sense, is
I know what I want to do. I know.
Yeah, you're gonna play
I
golf.
want to be a professional interviewer who takes people out golfing. And during 18 holes of golf, I interview them and then I write up a report. So anyway, if anybody's looking for someone that does that, please, I'm interested.
Well, there is science around external activities and interviewing and working through that stuff. And I'm sure you've seen that before. But that would be fun. But, the whole, where do they want to go and what do they want to do is something I ask people all the time. And it's fun to listen and see what they want to do, and they chuckle, but it's actually a really tough question, right? And it usually ends up being, well, what are you passionate about? What do you want to do? What's the joyful? And it goes back to my point about questions, right? You're asking a lot of questions, and there's a lot of folks probably listening going, that's all HR ever does is just ask questions. Do they have the answers? They're, like you mentioned, guys, you're not there to give them the answers. You're there to help guide and get that insightfulness piece back so then they can solve the thing, because it's really about them, right? It's not about you helping solve a problem. I mean, unless it's where is something, but getting that evolution of things is the journey of your career, is solving the treasure map with somebody along the way, because you're always asking questions, finding those other nuggets of information to be able to get there, and then and enjoying the success along the way, and having people there to support you is the biggest piece. So absolutely.
Yeah, and I would just say, Joe, I'm sure you've seen it and had that experience where you are part of that story for someone. You're part of showing them the way. You kind of share the clues along the map, and they end up in that career that they really love, that brings them joy. And there's no better phone call to get, I think, in being in recruitment as the candidate that just says like, you changed my life, right? I owe it all to you. The truth is we know they played a huge part in that, right? But
it's
I know
watching them
you see
grow,
it.
right? I mean,
Right.
now 20 plus years later, the interns that I hired are now managers and doing other things, right? It's seeing that success. And again, I didn't necessarily shape them for their career, but I got them started with an
Mhm.
opportunity. So seeing those things, it's not that this make me feel old, but it also makes me feel proud that, hey, listen, I hired them, right? And it's kind of
Mhm.
cool that way.
Right. Absolutely.
Becky, any final comments on your side?
Yeah, I think that, what you said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And just normalizing that we can ask that question at any time. I think there was a while in my life when I felt like I had to decide and that was it. And it was, oh my gosh, if I have to ask it again, I've done something wrong. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think you're always asking that question is a great thing. And like you said, being open and curious to what that answer is the exciting part of life, right? And being willing to reach out to people. I've met both of you through networking, and I'm a professed introvert. So networking is not easy for me, but I've found that I find people who are extroverts and I connect with them, and then I meet other people through them. So I encourage all my introverts out there to just, to do it.
Find your superpower.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm an extrovert. No.
Yeah, yes. Find that extrovert that's going
I'm
to
an introvert with you. Don't worry.
Oh,
Right.
okay, yeah.
People are shocked behind that. Yes. But yes.
And yeah, it's really, like you said, people want to help. They really do. And just being aware yeah, you have so much more support than you realize.
Well,
Absolutely.
Becky, honestly, I know that people are going to walk away from today. There's going to be a lot of aha moments, a lot of people hopefully inspired, encouraged, right? Feeling like they have a path now. And I'm so grateful to you for taking the time. I know you have a very busy life and a very successful career. So it's been our joy to have you today. Thank you so much. And I know you're one of our biggest supporters, so I want to thank you for all of your likes and just ask our audience out there if you have any feedback on today's episode or you have suggestions or recommendations for future episodes. We would love to hear from you. So please share your comments and feedback with us.
And Becky is not paid, so appreciate that. But no, thanks everyone for listening. I think you could see the journey is not linear like Becky's was, and everyone's isn't. Enjoy the treasure map, follow it along, get the nuggets of information, find your rainbow and that pot of gold, and connect with us, share the information, share insights and questions, and really appreciate it. So thanks everyone for joining, and thanks Becky for coming on, and always Jill, it's always a pleasure.
Take care, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you both so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.